Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 122. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation, and happy draft week to all those who celebrate the NFL Draft, kicking off this Thursday night for Round 1 in Green Bay, followed by Rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, Rounds 4 through 7 on Saturday. So it is finally almost here, Dave. We'll get our final draft thoughts in this podcast on Wednesday's show and probably Tuesday's show as well, considering tomorrow is when Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan will speak. Some more information will be on the way a little later this week, but still some things to talk about. Dave, how was your Easter weekend? How you doing?
Great. Nice and quiet Easter Sunday. And yeah, look, it's an exciting week. Obviously, the draft gets underway on Thursday night. I think we've got the podcast today. We've got the Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan press conference on Tuesday. We'll probably follow that up with another podcast. We'll probably have a Wednesday podcast kind of going over our final mock drafts, and then get after it on Thursday. So going to be a busy week as noted there.
All right, Dave, let's dive on in with a bunch of nuggets of information from ESPN's Adam Schefter coming out this morning. We know Monday before the draft, a heavy hitting kind of day for draft news and notes and reports. And obviously there's a lot of smoke screens and everything is possible, but who knows, if it's going to happen or not. So Schefter saying a couple things. I think among the most notable, he put George Pickens on his list of potentially expendable players this weekend. And the Pickens trade rumors have been percolating a little bit for quite some time now, especially post DK Metcalf trade. And we have no idea what's going to happen there, but Schefter thought Pickens' name was notable enough to put on a list of potential rookie contracts who could be on the move, although anybody trading for George Pickens would likely want to extend him to a long-term deal to make sure he is with a team for the long haul. So I'm sure you're not shocked by that news, Dave, but what do you make of that news of Pickens being on Schefter's list?
First and foremost, a lot of the things that we're going to cover from Adam Schefter first thing in the morning, it's not a coincidence that they hold on to all this stuff as a way to kick off the draft week on Monday with this long article and a lot of different bullet points in there. And specifically what you're noting there, 13 players, I think I counted in total that Adam Schefter listed, and right ahead of that, he put draft weekend is also a busy time for trades of players already on rosters. Here are players on rookie contracts who could be deemed expendable. So these 13 are players still on rookie contracts, and then he goes on to list, 6 players, I think, of veterans who could be available via trade. George Pickens obviously listed in that first 13 there. He's one of, 4 wide receivers, I think, listed in that group. George Pickens is the most notable of that group of wide receivers. And quite honestly, if you look at the list in totality, I would guess he's the most notable of all of them. I see Kayvon Thibodeau of the Giants listed in there, but I understand why he's listed for sure. And I think even our own Joe C, wrote a post over the weekend. And this is something kind of that we've talked about through here. This wide receiver class is not deemed as one of the better ones. In fact, I would say it's top heavy with a couple of real notable ones, maybe 3 or 4. And I don't know how much that differs from any other draft class. I have to go back in my head. And then in the middle of the draft class, it kind of feels like, what flavor are you looking for maybe of some number 2s and number 3s. And then I think it gets a little bit more exciting towards the back end of it, of guys that the potential guys, the guys that maybe still have a have a higher ceiling, and you could probably rubber stamp that, going back several drafts and all. But when you look at this draft class in particular, when you look at the situation that we've talked about with George Pickens, even dating back to the end of last year, about kind of doubting that he's going to see an extension this offseason. I still feel that way. I'm pretty sure you feel that same way as well. When you look at, if we were talking about a model player here, we would probably downplay more specifically the chances of Pickens being traded. And then on top of it, you look at, does this team really want to get itself sort of in a similar position as last year, where all we could talk about was, when is this team going to add a second wide receiver to go with George Pickens to make this wide receiver room more competitive, if you will, and give Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields better weapons on the field. And if they were to go about trading George Pickens, then you're back to seemingly kind of the same spot that you were in last year, although kind of a few different names. You would have obviously DK Metcalf, you would have Calvin Austin III, you would have Roman Wilson, who's only played 5 NFL snaps. Who else is in the wide receiver room? Ben Skoranek.
And you would likely be putting a rookie into that pile as well,
Right.
obviously.
And then whoever you drafted, it goes without saying that you would expect this team to draft a wide receiver. And look, we already kind of think this team's going to draft a wide receiver anyway at some point, but you almost definitely would see this team draft a wide receiver, and probably one that could stretch the field in somewhat of a George Pickens role there. So I've got to admit that what's the probability of this ultimately happen? I think I will say this: if the Steelers should entertain any and all phone calls that they receive or have received on George Pickens, and it all comes down to, what are what would be best for the team, and George Pickens specifically, when it comes to probably not going to extend him. How's his attitude going to be on the field this year if you don't extend him? What would it look like if he left next off season? What could you get for compensatory value? Not that that should be the end all do all, but you have to factor all this in overall. In my mind, if you could get a second, or at worst a early third round pick, I would think that the Steelers would entertain such an offer. I have talked quite a few times over the last couple of weeks of thinking, man, this team sure could use another top 100 pick. But I'm not talking about getting a number 99 or a 100. I would like, if this team does somehow get another top 100 pick, I would hope it would come earlier than their already scheduled third round pick. And
which is 83 for the record.
Which is 83. If you could achieve that, even if it's a high third rounder, I think you got to consider it.
You do. And to go back to what you mentioned earlier, our Joe C. Camaroto writing over the weekend about teams potentially being incentivized to call about George Pickens because of the weak receiver class. Now, the counter to that is, well, why would Pittsburgh want to deal with George Pickens if the receiver class is weak and they got to go find a receiver, which is a fair point. If there's one prospect they like, though, that's all it takes to justify potentially the trade. If the trade terms are just good enough for a guy that you're likely to lose after this season, it may be a good enough idea for the long haul. But the point of the article is not to say that Pittsburgh necessarily would increase the odds of trading George Pickens, knowing the receiver class, but the teams would be more likely to call. And all it takes is that one really strong offer from a team, knowing the situation. If we're less likely to get a really strong receiver in the draft. And so let's target a guy like George Pickens and take the chance on him. And so the phone calls may be, 'cause if this was last year's draft class, there may be less interest in George Pickens because the receiver class was so strong overall. And so why would a team want to have to trade capital, give George Pickens the contract, take all those risks when they could just sit and pick and take a rookie on a rookie 4-year contract? So I think that the dynamics change a little bit this year that will give teams more reason to call and potentially pursue George Pickens. And I'm with you, Dave. If there's an offer that is can't refuse status, then you have to really look at that because you know that you almost certainly are not keeping this guy past 2025.
And once again, if we didn't, if we were sure that George Pickens was going to be a more mature player and all this year, I mean, why would you want to trade him? You would just say, okay, we think we can win with him. We think we can put up with him from a attitude standpoint and all like that. And if we lost him during the off season after the 2025 season, he would obviously probably go for a huge contract, which would in turn unequivocally or more than likely set up for a third round compensatory value for him for 2027. But 2027 is a long way away at this point, and nothing's ever guaranteed in totality here. It would make it a lot easier to dissect this if if we had not seen just the kind of person and locker room guy that George Pickens. Now, he's not an awful guy. I'm not characterizing him that way, but if he does stay on this roster as is past the draft into 2025, we're going to be writing, I have a feeling, about George Pickens, about maybe attitudes during the game and things said after games, and heck, even leading up to the season. Will he show up to OTAs because of his contract situation? Could that carry over into training camp some, with him showing up and kind of soft holding out, if you will? Look, he's got to play X amount of games in 2025 if he wants the credited season towards free agency and all like that. So it's not like you're at risk of him sitting out the entire season. But what kind of stuff might you go through between now and the start of the regular season, and perhaps maybe into the regular season? And is it worth doing that? I think I've said it several times, I think he's a fantastic player on the field when all the other stuff is removed from him. But because of what we have up until this point with him, I think I understand why Adam Schefter has him on this list of 13 players with expiring or on rookie contracts at this point here. I suppose it comes down. Here's the other way that I think we need to look at this, and I think we have in bits and pieces since the season ended. Look at the team that might potentially trade for him, knowing everything that kind of we know about George Pickens, and probably even a little bit more. He's set to earn a little over $3 million this year. On the final year of his rookie contract because of getting the proven performance escalator. That $3 million plus salary is not an albatross to George Pickens potentially being traded. The expiring rookie contract has some degree of element to this that makes it a little bit tougher, because a team, if they're not able to work out with an extension with him either prior to trading for him or post trading for him, runs the risk of him doing the same things in their offseason and training camp that he may or may not do with the Steelers. So you do run the risk of and then obviously the attitude stuff throughout the season and all like that. It would take a special team, I think, and front office and head coach to, get Pickens and get him through the rest of the offseason and through the season, should they not ultimately extend him. And whatever they gave up, if they were to trade for him, they would have to kind of make it feasible enough where, okay, if we lost this guy as an unrestricted free agent, then we would be in a situation where maybe we would get a third round compensatory draft pick. So that's all that clouds it on the other side. Any team that trades for them would trade for George Pickens. They have to be careful of what they give up as far as trade compensation, and then do they have a plan in place to go ahead and extend him now? At what price? To maybe get out ahead of this? And if they don't, are they confident that they can work with a player like George Pickens, not under a new contract, just as the Steelers would have to do if they don't trade him and extend him this offseason? So it does get a little messy when you talk about a guy like George Pickens.
It is a benefit, though, that trading him and onboarding him initially is very manageable salary cap wise because of that rookie contract. So even though if you extend him shortly after the fact, if you were to trade for him hypothetically, it's easy to assume that contract initially, which you have to do to first facilitate the trade. Dave, do you think other teams would have to talk to Pickens' agent first as a requirement before the trade to either hammer out a deal completely or have a good idea of what an extension would look like? Or is that too difficult to do on a potential draft night where everything is just bonkers crazy?
I would like to think if there's any team out there that's seriously considering doing this, that there's probably some phone calls that may have already been made instead of having to do it when you're on the clock type situation or once the draft speaks and all like that. If I was a team that thinks that George Pickens is my missing piece for 2025, and I'm considering trading for him, and then I'm also thinking about maybe a long-term situation, I'm calling the Steelers right now and say, hey, are you open to trading him? And this, let if we did, what would the compensation look like? And if we can get the conversation that far, if I'm a GM of that other team, I would then ask for permission to talk to George Pickens' agent to see about what he's looking for as far as guaranteed money, as far as APY, and all like that, because I want to know all the parameters that I might be dealing with from the time he walks in my building, and whether or not I think I can hammer out a deal with him, and all like that. No way, shape, or form, if I were one of these general managers, would I just willy-nilly call up the Steelers before the
Sure.
second round gets underway and say, "Hey, are you willing to trade him?" And then be kind of in a rush because agents are busy. It's just so hard to get all that kind of business done, I would think, last minute. So long story short, if any of this goes down and Pickens does ultimately get dealt, I would like to think that a team maybe has already asked to kind of speak to his agent.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it'll be completely out of the blue to go from no trade talks at all to trying to figure all this out on draft night. But it is tough to navigate during the draft where, if a team is potentially in the receiver market, maybe a receiver falls to them in the first round or something happens where they can, have another roadmap. And so do you want to get into the weeds knee deep in trade talks on Pickens? Not sure if you're even going to trade for him and not sure if Pittsburgh is going to be open to trading Pickens. I mean, you do have a long time from round one to round two, from Friday night or from Thursday night to Friday night, where
Sure.
you can have some good trade conversations that occur then. And we think a day two trade, in terms of return for Pittsburgh, is most likely. Pickens is not going to fetch a first round pick, so this would not have to get figured out Thursday night necessarily. And teams could evaluate: do we take a receiver in round one, a Tedero McMillan, a Matthew Golden, a Mecca Buka, something like that? If we don't get those guys, then okay, let's jump into Pickens and work those phones for all of Friday Friday morning into Friday evening. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. My stance really remains the same, that I think Pittsburgh would like to keep George Pickens, to have that true vertical duo of George Pickens and DK Metcalf for 2025 to give the Steelers offense the best shot possible to have success that is long overdue and they're very much starved to have. But if they get a really good offer, they just simply cannot refuse, then you really have to consider it. So that's really where I've been at for a while now. And even though this mention from Schefter is certainly notable, my stance really remains the same. It's possible, but it's going to have to take a really good offer to get Pittsburgh to move off George Pickens.
And here's the thing, I would like to think, and that's dangerous saying that, I'd like to think that part of the offseason conversations leading up to the draft the Steelers have had would be, what does it look like if we do get the right offer for George Pickens? What does that look like on our end as it relates not to only the draft, but how we're going to run the offense, what we're expecting the wide receiver room to potentially look like? How does that change maybe our draft plans and maybe 3 or 4 guys that we could target? How quickly might we be able to get those guys on the field? That kind of thing here. If you had one more other obvious, once again, this team runs the danger of being somewhat in the same situation that they were in last year if they were to trade George Pickens away. Well, here, you go out you finally go out there and get DK Metcalf, get George Pickens some help, but then you trade away George Pickens, and where's DK Metcalf's help? And Calvin Austin, I thought, had a good season last year, taking that next step forward. The one of the big problems was you did not get to see anything out of Roman Wilson, and and obviously if you bring a rookie into the room, look, Ben Skoranek, I was a little bit surprised it was a 2-year contract. I was a little bit surprised it was for a little bit more money than a minimal deal. But the fact of the matter is that this guy's more special teams than he is anything else. I mean, if you're getting yourself in a situation where you're relying on any notable snaps out of Ben Skoranek on offense, you have done this wrong. And look, I mean, that could happen through injury and all like that anyway here. So it does come down to, what can you get for George Pickens? What do you think you can get in the draft, and maybe even post draft, as far as maybe some cheap free agent help to get you to where you can get that draft pick up to speed and all? And what do you think you can win? Plain and simple, do you think you can win without DK Metcalf? Heck, we don't even know who the quarterback is going to be on this team right now. But
Sure.
if I will say this: if I'm a team trading for George Pickens, I don't know if I want to let go a middle of a second round pick for him. It would have to, I think, come in the later portions of the second round and or early portion of the third round. So I think that's what you're kind of playing with as far as compensation goes. Later second round, early third round. And on the Steelers flip side too, once again, I in my heart of hearts tells me that this team somehow, some way is still going to come out of the first 3 rounds of this draft with 3 picks. And if I were to add another top 100 pick, I don't want it to come after the one I already have there in the third round. I want it to come either in the second round or early in the third round. I don't think we're going to get a lot of nastiness for this conversation. I know, but
No, you think? I don't know. I think
I think overall there's a lot of people that think, why the hell are you wanting to trade George Pickens and get yourself in the same situation that you were in last year? And I get that. I'll say it until he's no longer, a Steeler. He's a very talented player, but it's the other stuff that comes along with George Pickens that makes him in really frustrating. And I would not even be entertaining the idea of this team trading George Pickens away for anything other than a first round pick if George Pickens was more, if we weren't having these other conversations about him off the field.
Sure.
But,
well, he'd probably be extended by now or by the summer
right.
if that was the case. I mean, I obviously, yes, if Pittsburgh trades Pickens, they put themselves in a potentially similar situation to last year. But I think people understand the issues with George Pickens, the unlikelihood he returns in 2026, the difficulty he presents, the volatility he shows, and some people are fed up with him. So I'm sure we'll get some of that pushback, but it's not. What do you say? It doesn't take a rocket surgeon to figure out the reasons to potentially explore George Pickens' trade.
Right. I think it's plausible to have discussions about George Pickens possibly being traded by the end of day 2. When it comes to the likelihood of it overall happening, I think it's more likely to happen than the average person probably listening to this show thinks, whatever degree that percentage you want to put that at. I think this whole thing. Now, look, if he doesn't get traded, people are going to say, "I remember how y'all talked about George Pickens possibly be traded. You guys were wrong." I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen, but I think there's a level of plausibility within this that people should not be shocked if indeed this winds up happening.
Quickly, hypothetically, if Pittsburgh gets a late 2 and early 3, they trade George Pickens. They're, of course, going to be looking for a receiver. Who could they potentially look at and target with that late 2, early 3 selection?
You want me to spill all my beans, don't you?
I do. Hit me.
You're trying to. I just think because of at my heart of hearts right now, I still would be surprised if this team took a quarterback in the first round. I think there's a need for this team to draft a quarterback at some point. I think also this team probably would like to take a running back in the first 2 days of the draft as well too. It would make things a lot easier on some things that I have mopped out, laid out for a mock draft if they were to somehow, whether it be Pickens or however you want to look at it, for this team to acquire either a second round pick or another third round pick.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if they get that extra selection, what receiver prospect could they potentially be targeting? They've done their homework on some of those guys.
Right. I don't think if they dealt Pickens, I'm not convinced that it would be a wide receiver taken in the first 2 days. I think
Really?
yeah. I think that we're looking at guys that we've talked about that are potentially round 4, round 5 guys with the upside here. We've talked about. Oh man, I mean, there's quite a list of them. Would a guy like Torrey Horton maybe slip into round 4? Would Dante Thornton slip? Would the Ole Miss wide receiver, Antoine Wells Jr., could that be a guy? I think there's a list of 3 or 4 wide receivers that would potentially be there in round 4, round 5, that could at least help ease the pain a little bit of a guy losing a guy like George Pickens.
But then who's your starting receiver opposite DK Metcalf?
Yeah, you would have DK and Calvin Austin, and you hope Roman Wilson becomes the guy that you spend a third round draft pick on while you develop this rookie.
I think it's just really hard to put your eggs, to use the Easter pun, into the basket of a 4th round pick, even though I'm with you on somebody like Dante Thornton. I really like him. But if you're trading George Pickens for a 2 or 3, I think you have to take a receiver on the first 2 days. And I know I talked about the class being weak and trying to navigate that, but if there is one prospect you like, you look at him with Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. It's probably a higher end 2nd round pick, but Pittsburgh brought him in for a visit. Both Iowa State kids came in. Jalen Noel, who's a small speedster. Higgins is the big tracker, downfield kind of a guy, in a similar-ish mold to George Pickens. Trey Harris from Ole Miss, Nakazani at that pro day. I could potentially see that. Could Iman Noor from Stanford. Pittsburgh has not shown much visible interest in him, but man, that feels like a Steelers kind of a guy. Big play, aggressive blocker, good size, can win downfield. You and I are both big fans of him. So it just, I know we talked about the day 3 guys a lot, but if they trade Pickens and make that radical move, I think they'd be doing themselves a disservice to not then add a receiver on day 2.
Sure, I get that, but I mean, once again, we're back to why are teams even considering trading for George Pickens? Is because outside of maybe the top two or 3 guys in this draft class, it's not great in kind of the middle rounds here,
Right.
And that's why I think.
Go ahead.
That's why I think round 4 becomes the ideal spot to maybe pick up that replacement for Pickens.
Yeah, Maybe you do both. Maybe you could theoretically double dip, but I just think they would like to get somebody to try to come in. The concern that I would have with a rookie, especially, is if Aaron Rodgers does sign, I still have to go into the extensive kind of background, but typically rookies don't do well with an Aaron Rodgers who has high expectations and wants guys to be able to get the system understood right away. And that's all fair and justified. I'm not critiquing it, but that is generally how it goes. Rookies don't tend to produce with Aaron Rodgers. Malachi Corley, the example that he used last year for the Jets, who had 3-4 receptions all season as a third round selection. So that would be my additional concern. But you trade Pickens just because the offer is so good. You know you're losing him after this year. And instead of getting the potential comp pick 2 years from now, which could still be canceled out by any free agency splashes that you make yourselves, you get the higher pick immediately. And that would be the incentive for Pittsburgh. So again, I think it'll take a really strong offer. I'm not trading George Pickens for as you said, the pick 101 in the draft. It's not a net worth it to lose that for the short term. But if you get, making up numbers, pick 61, that becomes a lot more tempting.
All right. I think in the past you have tweeted or written or something that you wouldn't trade him for anything other than a second. Would you, if all you got was a pick, let's say in the top 10 of the third round, would you deal with him for that?
It would partly matter who's on the board receiver-wise, who's all left that I'd be interested in taking to replace Pickens with. I mean, we're talking late 2, early 3. They're obviously pretty equivalent. Maybe if I got something extra to sweeten the pot, but nothing outside of very early third round would be maybe the absolute least I'd be even having a conversation with the team about.
We both would be shocked if this team got a first-round pick for George Pickens, right?
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
What about a top half of the second round pick for Pickens? Do you think that's out of the question?
I don't. I know it sounds a little crazy off the top that if Pickens got more than, say, what DK Metcalf fetched, but if teams are desperate enough and the draft can create that urgency, this is the last time to really make that splash roster building move, and knowing the receiver class is not particularly strong, I had laid out that trade scenario over the weekend, maybe New England at 38. I know that's super high, but if they want that big target for Drake May to really transform their offense, kind of Mike Vrabel thinks he can strong arm and he's, stable enough to get Pickens in line, maybe. I mean, obviously you wouldn't expect it wouldn't be the initial expectation, but I wouldn't be shocked if there was a top 50 pick for George Pickens if some team got desperate enough.
What about the Chiefs? Where do they pick in the second round?
I can look. I assume lower in the second round, considering they're at 31.
Yeah, they picked 63rd. So, I mean, what if all you could get was a 63 for George Pickens?
They also pick at 66 too in the top of the third round, so they got a couple of day 2 picks there. I think that's in that range of what I talked about. Day 2 or round 2, I should say, selection.
Who else could you imagine? We've talked about Seattle has a couple of second round picks. Even though Chicago has a couple of them, I can't see Chicago being.
Yeah, I think they've gone down that road for trading for problematic Steelers receivers before.
Buffalo has a couple of second round picks, but it feels like they're kind of okay at wide receiver right now. So I'm thinking about teams that would be probably I know there's a lot of talk about, man, when's Green Bay finally going to draft that Green Bay needs another wide receiver, and will they pick one in the first round? And if not, would they pick one in the second round? And where they pick right now, would anybody still be on the board that interests them? Would they be interested in trading? What do they pick? Number 54, I think. Would they be interested in trading for a guy like George Pickens? It feels unlikely in my eyes.
I think we highlighted the teams that make the most amount of sense in the Chiefs and the Patriots. The Patriots also picked number 69 overall in the third round. So if you're blushing at the 38 that I suggested, 69 and maybe something else would do that. The Patriots have a couple of third round selections at 69 and 77. Remember the Chiefs, they were looking for Deontay Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh could have had that deal done last year. They did not want to trade Deontay to the contending Chiefs and sent him to the NFC. They could justify the same reasons this year for Pickens, but if the offer is the best offer, then maybe let the Chiefs have Pickens and say good luck dealing with him.
And if the Chiefs were to trade for him, we're getting into people are probably foaming at the mouth. We're getting into some hypotheticals here. uh, uh, if the Chiefs traded for Kansas City, I mean, if the Chiefs traded for Pickens and just did not have an extension planned for him this offseason, the way they would try to probably sell that more to him is, look, come win a Super Bowl with us in 2025, have a good season, and you are going to go through the roof as far as what you're going to get as far as contract goes next offseason.
Yeah, I could see that. So we'll see. We'll sit and wait. I think Pittsburgh will listen. I don't think they'll be shopping George Pickens. I don't think they'll be calling teams, but I think teams will call them and see, is he available? What is he available for? Maybe some contract talk, parameters get going, and we'll see what happens from there.
Right, and I understand how it feels like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth. The way we blasted this team last year for the way the Steelers handled the wide receiver position, but I think this is plausible to have the discussion about him potentially being traded by the end of day 2.
Or at the least, I think what'll happen is we'll get some report Thursday, Friday. Teams are inquiring about George Pickens. Pittsburgh is not shopping him, but they are listening because I think there will be a demand for a guy like Pickens given the less than stellar rookie wide receiver class. I think we're going to hear more about this, which is why I think I wanted to bring it up today. And of course, Schefter noting it, and that's kind of the catalyst for our conversation today. Let's stick with trades, Dave, not involving George Pickens, but Adam Schefter also noting Pittsburgh among several teams looking to potentially trade down in the first round of the NFL draft, sitting at number 21 currently. Only 6 selections overall because of the DK Metcalf trade, only 2 picks in the top 120 selections this year. So they've talked plenty about this team potentially somehow, some way trying to acquire another top 100 selection. A trade down in the first round could be one way to do that.
Yeah, and I think that would please a lot of people listening to this show if they were able to do that. I think where it becomes messy within that is how far down would they have to go, and would they still be able to get either a quarterback that they are enthralled with because of moving down, or would they be able to get a defensive lineman? A Derrick Harmon or a Kenneth Grant, or I've seen Walter Nolan go all over the place. As far as first round goes, and could you guarantee yourself that you get? There's obviously been a lot of buzz about Shedeur Sanders. We'll see how many of these quarterbacks end up going in the top 9, where the line of New Orleans is, and which one falls out. Are the Steelers really as fascinated with Dart? Are they fascinated with Sanders? Should he fall? Would they even consider a guy like Tyler Shuck? Late first round. It's so hard to say when it comes to the overall quality or perceived quality of this quarterback draft class, or if they had their sights on maybe a more mid-round guy, with like a Will Howard or something like that, and they did move down in the first round. What are they looking at getting there if it's not a defensive lineman, if one of those 3 is not there for them? How far down would they be willing to move? Would they be okay? We're okay with one of these X amount of 4, 5, 6, 7 players per se.
And is that still their philosophy? That was the Kevin Colbert philosophy of we're only willing to move down as many spots as there are guys that we'd be willing to take so we don't get caught with our pants down if there's a big run on all the guys that we have targeted. But is that the model under Omar Khan? It's hard to say. He moved up in his first draft. He's moved down in the past, but that was mid-rounds, third round, not in the first round. I think if you're Pittsburgh, you move down. If A, you're not taking a quarterback in the first round if a Shedeur Sanders is gone, or you're just not going to take Shedeur, even if he's there at 21 for whatever reason, then you're looking to trade down and still really take advantage of a deep defensive line class where, yes, maybe you miss out on Kenneth Grant or Derrick Harmon, but you get a Tyreek Williams from Ohio State, and Alfred Collins from Texas, somebody like that, and you pick up a pick in the process. That's probably the reason why I think you do trade down and, of course, try to recoup some of that capital to help get a receiver, to get a running back, to navigate all your needs with only the 6 selections and the pretty limited picks at the top of the draft, sitting at just 21 and 83 overall over the first 2 days. The issue and the concern I have is, and Schefter made this point in the article that he wrote, and we've talked about this for a while. I wrote about this back on April 5th. You can trade down, but somebody's got to have to want to trade up with you.
Right.
And who wants to trade up in a draft class that is generally pretty weak, where maybe teams aren't jumping up for the quarterback? You never know. It just takes one team who just has interest in one player. We mapped out scenarios over the weekend in which teams trade up for a tackle. The Chiefs at 31, the Texans at 24. Those teams are very tackle needy right now. So it's always possible, but it's the old, you're a Megadeth fan, right? P sells,
Oh,
but who's
yeah.
buying? Trade
Absolutely.
down sells.
Woohoo.
I'm always team trade down, but who's buying? And that's the other side, the other shoe that has to drop to facilitate these things. And Schefter noted that teams are generally not looking to trade up this year, and that's been said by Jason Light, the Bucs GM. Schefter noted that Broncos could potentially trade up, but they're sitting one pick ahead of Pittsburgh at 20. So of course Pittsburgh can't be trading down with a team ahead of them. So you never know. It's always unpredictable. I think Pittsburgh would consider a trade down, but finding that trade partner will be the real challenge.
I got to get a tissue here to wipe these tears streaming down my eyes. You dropping a Megadeth reference
Easter
in this
changes a
show.
man.
What about Green Bay maybe wanting to go up a couple of spots to 21 to maybe get if Matthew Golden's sitting there at that point. What about I don't know. I don't think Minnesota has a lot of picks
No,
in this
they have the
draft.
fewest picks of any team this
Yeah,
year.
so I don't think they'd be wanting to move up there. What if Nick Emanuori was still on the board there? Is there a team below them that'd be wanting to come up a couple of spots? Uh, Once again, it probably wouldn't be Green Bay, probably wouldn't be Minnesota. Houston only has 7 picks. I don't think Houston's going to be wanting to come up for just a safety.
But if it's a tackle, they have nothing to replace Laramie Tunsil. If there's a guy they want, I don't know, Calvin Banks, Josh Simmons, whatever tackle you want to put in there, I could see that. They might be fighting the Chiefs, who might want to be moving up too. The issue with a team like the Packers at 23 is you could trade with them, but are you going to get a day 2 pick back for them to go
Right.
up 2 spots? Probably not. You maybe get a 4th at best, and so it helps a little bit, but not a ton.
Right. I guess the thing is with the Steelers trading down in the first round, it would be a stop the presses kind of moment because we haven't seen this team trade down in the first round since Casey Hampton, right?
In 2001, correct?
All right, so it would be wow. It would be a wow news breaking situation, and then then the flip side of that would be how far of a move down would also create a wow. Can you believe they moved down 7 spot? Not only did they trade out or trade down in the first round, but man, look how far they traded down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just depends on the parameters, but if you want to ensure you get that really nice day 2 selection, you got to go down probably a little more than maybe you're comfortable with, or that's ideal. It's hard to go down, like I said, 2 spots and get that day 2 selection. So it may require, do you go down to 31 with Kansas City? I still think you consider that. The Chiefs have multiple day 2 picks. I said earlier, 63 and 66. You get ideally one of those selections. You still get a defensive lineman at 31. The names I mentioned, Williams and Collins, makes the most amount of sense. And you're sitting pretty. Then you have pick, let's just call it 66 and 83. You got 2 picks on day 2, so you're back to your standard 2 selections on the second day of the draft, and now you get that running back. Now you get that receiver. Now you're really starting to build your roster.
Right. So once again, I think we've got a plausible, even though it hasn't happened since Casey Hampton, if there was a year to potentially do this and go down in the first round, this this could potentially, have the higher probability than most years.
And although it's pretty flowery to say and probably ultimately meaningless, there's something poetic about trading down and still getting a defensive lineman, as Pittsburgh did in '01, and maybe a Texas defensive lineman at that in Alfred Collins, who I know was been viewed as more of an early second-round pick, but I think in a weaker draft class, late first round, early second round, the lines are probably pretty blurred, and if you like Alfred Collins, then I think you have no problem taking him at 31 if you're going to take him at pick 37 or wherever he's probably projected to go right now.
What about the likelihood of them trading out of the first round completely?
That's now talk about a big radical stop the presses kind of move there. You never know, but I think it would have to take a really, really big haul. What if a team like, though, the Giants want to come up and draft a quarterback and Pittsburgh is out on Shedeur? I don't think it'll be the case, but if it's for a Jackson Dart or something like that, do they make calls? What about the Saints? Do they want to come back up in the second round? That's been talked about a ton so far. That seems like a little too rich for Pittsburgh, but you just never know until the offers get made. You see what the offer is.
If they did trade out of the first round completely, I would think that it would be maybe a team like, would they even trade with Cleveland? Would Cleveland want to come up from, let's say Cleveland took Hunter at number 2 overall, which I think a lot of people think that's going to ultimately happen, and they want to reunite Shedeur Sanders with him. Could they come up from 33 to 21 to get Shedeur Sanders, and would Pittsburgh allow that to even happen? What about the Giants even?
That was going to be my question. Do you let the Browns come up and get the quarterback? I mean, it depends on the offer a little bit, but I think you're a little less interested in allowing Cleveland to make that happen by trading with you in particular.
What about the Giants coming from 34 to 21? That's a long way down, And
you lose the 5th-year option, but if the trade is good enough, then you maybe consider that, because 34 is still right off that first-round range, and you still get those defensive linemen. The hypothetical I came up with, and I know we're getting really into the weeds on hypotheticals, which we rarely do, so celebrate that for those who wish we did more often. We'll do that a little bit today. I had the hypothetical, and this is not me endorsing it. I just was having fun this weekend. This is my definition of fun: mock drafts and trade projections and possibilities. Pittsburgh trades number 21, number 156 overall. New Orleans trades number 40, of course, the second round, number 71, which is the third round, number 112, fourth round in a 2026 second round selection to come up to 21 and take a quarterback. Would you consider something like that, Dave? Especially potentially, in this case, you would be getting a second round pick next year to really add to your army of selections you're stashing.
All right, so that would mean trading out of the first round completely, right?
Yes, from 21 down to 40.
That's a long way to wait, but I mean, I think you'd have to consider that for sure, but boy, that's out there. How'd you come up with that one?
Boredom, just
Yeah.
just trying to make stuff up, but just for the post there. But I mean, I think the Giants are a little more plausible if you did consider trading out first round. Obviously, going down to 34 is not as steep as number 40. The point is just to say that if there are teams potentially trading up, it could be a team like the Saints, like the Giants, trying to get back in the first round for a quarterback, especially if Shedeur slips or if this particular team loves, Jackson Dart. Yeah, I think the Saints like Tyler Shuck, but would they go up to 21 and get him? That feels a little rich. Maybe they could wait and get later in the first round to come back up in that 29-ish range, but who the heck knows?
What is more likely to happen? The Steelers trade down in the first round, or the Steelers trade George Pickens?
Trade down in the first round.
Okay. I would go the other way. I would go more likely to trade Pickens than trade down.
Okay, fair enough, but we'll see if there's a trade. It could all be for naught, like you said, and nothing happens.
Right.
But want to entertain it, Schefter making mention of it, and we'll see what happens come Thursday night and Friday night as well.
All right. Both are plausible, I think, is my come down on that.
One other note from Adam Schefter in his notebook of information today, he noted that quarterbacks coach for Pittsburgh, Tom Arth, flew out to North Dakota last month, I should say, to watch North Dakota State quarterback Cam Miller. I don't know for sure if this was a private workout or the pro day for North Dakota State. We never spotted Arth at North Dakota State. I even went back and checked earlier today for any new footage. I found one video of the pro day, but nothing I did not see. Tom Mark doesn't mean he wasn't there. I just did not see him. We know that director of pro scouting, Sheldon White, was at the pro day. He was at all the Dakota schools this year. But point is, Steelers sending their quarterbacks coach to North Dakota State for Cam Miller, and Miller projected to be late round pick, potentially undrafted. He's short, but he was productive for the Bison.
I've watched a little bit of his stuff, his tape at North Dakota State. Not a lot of it, no. I mean, fun guy to watch. But I would view this more as maybe looking at a potential undrafted quarterback situation here.
But will Pittsburgh ever get a decent undrafted quarterback? I think they would struggle to potentially attain one of those guys if there's a competitive market for somebody like a Cam Miller.
I would like to think, and that's dangerous, that this team whole plan to come out of this draft with a quarterback does not end in a 6th or a 7th round draft pick being spent on Cam Miller.
Sure, but we've seen this team take Chris Holodokin in the 7th round, and that was, I think, in my estimation, to secure a quarterback because they would lose out on that guy in the undrafted pool where some team offers $250,000 partial base salary guarantee, and Pittsburgh has their $30,000 signing bonus that is completely uncompetitive. So I think it's just more ammunition and evidence Pittsburgh is drafting a quarterback at some point. Where and who that'll be is a much more difficult question to answer. But this team has done so much homework on quarterback, it is really hard to see them not take one at some point within their selections.
I mean, other than this is when you talk about kind of draftable quarterbacks and even top of the undrafted list, this is the second shortest quarterback in this draft, isn't it?
Who's shorter? I mean, I would have projected he would have been the shortest at
Dylan Gabriel's 5'11" and 1/8.
How tall is Miller? We have him listed 5'10", 1/8, but I know heights and arm lengths have been kind of weird this year.
Dane Brugler's got him at 6 foot and 7/8.
Really? Must have been a weird way, and I'll have to double check that. But either way, Miller's not a big quarterback by any means. So yeah, I mean, I get it, but quarterbacks have been getting shorter, and you don't see many of those 6'4" guys these days. Howard and Shuck are closest to it, but those 6'2" and unders have become a lot more in vogue.
I'm not reading too much into the whole Cam Miller thing other than maybe potential undrafted free agent guy.
Yeah, but I mean, you send your quarterbacks coach North Dakota. Remember this team, and we didn't find this out until after the draft last year, but remember Arthur Smith and I think Pat Meyer went to South Dakota State a week before the draft to work out Mason McCormick and got him some center reps, and he ended up being their 4th round pick, ended up playing a lot more guard than center, obviously, but just a little parallel between sending a coach before the draft. Now, this was in March. This wasn't right before the draft, and it may have been at the pro day, but some Dakota coach sending, could that happen again? I don't know. It's a little interesting nugget there, I think.
All right. There will be a lot of broken TVs if the only quarterback drafted by the Steelers this year is in the 6th or 7th round, and it's Cam Miller.
Yeah, that's a fair point there. But I just think they're taking a quarterback. I mean, that's a very broad and blanket statement to make,
Sure.
But it's just hard to believe they won't take a quarterback to get a rookie under contract, a 4-year deal, and just stop having complete turnover in the quarterback room every single year. So if you draft a quarterback, and even if it is a Cam Miller, you have Mason Rudolph signed under contract for next year, even if Aaron Rodgers signs and then doesn't return in 2026, you have Rudolph returning, you have Cam Miller returning. Those do not starting options, but at least it is some continuity, some stability, so you're not having to redo the entire quarterback room for a 3rd straight season.
Okay. All right.
That's my viewpoint of one incentive to draft a quarterback, even if it is going to be a mid to later round guy who is not maybe your franchise of the future.
All right.
Or the franchise, I should say. All right, Dave, let's talk about Gerry Dulac. He went on the Rich Eisen show Friday and offered his take on where things are going to go. He believes that defensive line is the team's number one priority, and they would only consider other options, including quarterback, if those defensive linemen were gone. And he mentioned the big 3 in this class, really the big 4, but Mason Graham will be long gone. By 21, he mentioned Dulac did. Ole Miss's Walter Nolan, Oregon's Derrick Harmon, and Michigan's Kenneth Grant. And so we know about their interest in Harmon and Grant. We've not seen the interest on Nolan. Dulac still believes it's a possibility, but his thought is D-line is mission number 1, and they'll only pivot off of that if those guys are no longer on the board.
The pushback I would have on that is, how sold are conversation we had. What conviction do they have on potentially one or two quarterbacks that may still be on the board that they have first round grades on? And if you think that you have any shot, when you don't have a franchise quarterback, you need a franchise quarterback. We've established that. If you think one of these guys has a shot to be a franchise quarterback, I don't care what your need or want or whatever is at the other position, you have got to spend the pick on the guy that you think can be the franchise quarterback. So that would be my pushback on that. If you got a guy that you have conviction in, even though me and you and a lot of people listening to this podcast might not have the same conviction if that quarterback, if the franchise has conviction in a certain player at that such an important position, that has to reign supreme over every other position and guy that you might like.
And I hear you, and it was interesting because in the same breath, Dulac said the team has a first-round grade on Jackson Dart, and while he didn't explicitly say they had a first-round grade on Shedeur Sanders, he said they really like Shedeur Sanders, which I think you could imply they have a first-round grade on him. So how do you have a first-round grade on a quarterback and then not take him over a
Right.
defensive lineman? If you have first-round grade on a D lineman and a quarterback always wins out.
Sure. What all has Dulac said throughout this process about the quarterback? Hadn't he kind of waffled a little bit on some of this?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure what his commentary has been. I mean,
If this is where he's at, I mean, let's just take him from where he's at right now. It goes back to if you think you got an opportunity to get a franchise quarterback, I don't care what else is out there. You got to take the quarterback, regardless of what we think,
Right, and I do think back to 2022, he downplayed the idea of them taking a quarterback that year. He said he'd be surprised if they took a quarterback in 2022, and of course they took two, including the first quarterback in the draft in Kenny Pickett. So whatever it's worth, but that's Dulac's standpoint. And obviously defensive lineman is a big need for this team, and we've talked a lot about the potential of taking a Derrick Harmon or a Kenneth Grant. So it's not a crazy idea, but it did seem a little curious for him to say they have a first round grade on Dart, but they don't plan on necessarily taking him unless the D linemen are off the board. But also it's like, okay, what does having a first round grade mean exactly? Because it's not like, I don't know exactly how the process has changed post Kevin Colbert, but there's a lot of scouting reports to get made. And so there's different scouting reports that are made by area scouts, by positional coaches, by offensive coordinators, by head coach, by general manager, by, I'm sure, Andy Weidel. And so it's not always like just one scouting report on a guy. There's a lot of reports and cross checks and things like that. So I know Kevin Colbert once talked about, I think, like 5 scouting reports, or like we had 5 A grades on maybe it was Mason Rudolph. And so I don't know if that's oversimplifying it from Dulac's standpoint that they have a first round grade on Jackson Dart. Is he referring to where he's at on their board? There's probably a lot more to nitpick about that comment that Dulac really isn't providing.
Right. And once again, if you take it for way it's written or said, it's the fact that if you have a guy that you deem a franchise quarterback and he's sitting there at 21, I don't care what other position. If you have the conviction to in that guy, you at that position, you have to take the quarterback there.
In your mind, do any quarterbacks outside of Cam Ward carry a first round grade on your Dave Bryan board?
Personally, look, I think Sanders. I think Sanders should be the second quarterback off the board. Personally, we had the whole conversation. Do I view him as a franchise guy? No, but I think in this class, I have him as a second quarterback.
So he's not a first round guy in your estimation?
No.
Okay, because to me that's the important question. It's not just is he this what is he ranked, but what is the grade? Because you can be the 4th best quarterback, have a first round grade like last year, or you can be the 2nd ranked quarterback and have a second round grade, and that's potentially where Sanders at the 2022 class may have been. You're the 2nd best quarterback, but are you the tallest kid in kindergarten kind of a thing.
Right. Man, and I think you agree with me, right?
Yeah, I couldn't get there with Sanders. I mean, I didn't have an official grade. I didn't write the official report on him. Our site had a second round grade in the report that we wrote, but I did not view him as a first round, bang the table kind of guy. Now, the team could feel differently, and reporting seems to indicate they certainly
Right.
may feel differently, may view him as a first round guy. I do get the sense, and we'll probably talk about this more Wednesday, that if there is a quarterback they will take, it's going to be Shedeur Sanders or bust. I don't think it'll be ultimately Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe in the first round. I think it's really going to come down to Shedeur versus defensive line as the pick at 21.
I would agree with that.
All right. Let's see. What else from Dulac? Anything else that was really media notable? He talked about partial details on an Aaron Rodgers contract, said it is a 1-year deal. He says, quote, I can't tell you exactly what the number is, but it's not anything that's going to blow somebody away, end quote. And so that's the monetary number. We know Rodgers talked about the 10 million, 10 M's he played for. I don't know if that's what the number is, but Dulac says the contract is not anything crazy and it is a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I would think, like we talked about the other day, we're talking about a range probably anywhere from 10 million to 29 million with him. But did find it curious that Aaron Rodgers was willing to throw out a number as low as 10 million. So anywhere between in that, it would definitely fit within a cash perspective for the Steelers if it was anywhere in that, and that's a huge range of 10 to 29 million, I know, but it makes a lot more sense than the 30 to 40 million dollars that was has been thrown about when it comes to Rodgers. And yeah, it makes sense for it to be a 1-year deal. I mean, if you did a 2-year deal with him, fine. All it's going to mean is a lower cap number in the first year because there's not going to be any guaranteed money past the first year, and you would just be doing it to work around the cap number a little bit. And Aaron Rodgers would probably know that as well too.
Dulac also saying that TJ Watt wants to stay in Pittsburgh, believes a deal will get done, but doesn't think it'll be the monster deal it was in 2021 when TJ Watt became the highest paid pass rusher in football. So I don't know exactly what Dulac views as realistic contract terms. I think any deal will have to be a monster deal.
Yeah.
Even if it is below Myles Garrett, it's still going to be 35 million plus. I call that a monster deal. So not really sure exactly what the commentary there was from Dulac, but he's not it doesn't sound like he's expecting Watt to get more than Myles Garrett at the very least.
Yeah, but I mean, in the same, a monster deal still would be second behind Garrett, right?
In my world, yes.
Yeah.
Still call that a monster deal.
Yeah, I would as well too, especially when and the guarantee would at least be the first 2 years. I would think if I'm TJ Watt, I'm gunning for at least the first 2 years fully guaranteed, if not the first 3 again.
Right. So that was his commentary, but he says TJ Watt wants to stay. I mean, I know the Instagram stuff. Did you make anything out of TJ Watt not saying anything after the fact? If that Instagram post was an accident and just inadvertent of I just posted a photo that was on my roll and people took it the wrong way, would he have said something after the fact? Would JJ have said something? Do you think that tells you anything about what the point Watt was trying to make?
If he was trying to make a point, then let it continue to make a point out there. I still don't think that TJ Watt wants out of Pittsburgh. I think I believe him and everything he has said up until this point, which obviously isn't a lot, but I believe him that he wants to continue on with this. I believe he likes to play for Mike Tomlin. I can't foresee him banging the table, says, okay, early conversations are not going well. Get me out of here.
Well, he posted it. Some people believe he posted it as some sort of negotiation tactic to put some sort of pressure on the organization.
I'm not going out of my way to let people, if you worried about what everybody thought about everything that you did, you'd spend a lot of time on social media saying, I didn't mean that. You'd be, I'm not making a lot out of it, especially for this time of year, and him not shooting it down or his brother not shooting it down or anything like that. Has his brother even been on anything?
Not to my knowledge, no.
I mean, he's active on Twitter, so I suppose he could have come out and played clean up there, but it's also it's TJ's business too. Probably don't want to get too deeply involved in that, but maybe it was just a kind of a sign. Hey, I'm not happy with the way things are going. I'm trying to send a minuscule message here, but once again, the Steelers missed their window of trying to get out ahead of this, and they do have the draft to concentrate. Look, here's the thing. The media would not be doing their job if they did not ask Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin about that Instagram post on Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon.
What do you think? And I agree, it should be asked. It will be asked tomorrow. What do you think the response will be from Pittsburgh's end?
Our intention all along has for TJ Watt to retire as a Steeler.
Agreed. I think it'll be, listen, guys, we're focused on the NFL draft. We're super excited about this weekend. We love TJ. We want him to be a Steeler. That'll be the essential message, very similar to before, but also trying to deflect and bring it back to the draft.
Right. It will be TJ wants to be a Steeler. We want him to be a Steeler. Right now is not the time to figure that out right now.
Yeah. And also, TJ, can you take less to Myles Garrett? Because we didn't plan on paying you a number that started with a 4. They won't say that part.
No.
But it's an internal monologue. All right, Dave, any other news here? Any other notes that's coming in? I mean, obviously, we're going to probably do a Tuesday show to recap Tomlin and Khan. We're going to have a Monday live stream tonight as well to get our final draft thoughts and get your questions in. Am I missing anything big? My mock draft for Pittsburgh will come out tomorrow morning. Dave's will come out Wednesday, so we'll talk about that for the Wednesday show. Anything else here, Dave, that we should be talking about?
Let me ask you about your thoughts first on kind of the first round flow as far as overall ways we think this could go. Just up until the 20th pick or 21st pick, where the Steelers are here. One of the things that I'm starting to see is or have seen. Some people have Derrick Harmon as, I think, the second defensive lineman off the board behind Mason Graham. And specifically, I'm seeing 17 to the Bengals. Do you think at its core, Derrick Harmon's a fit for the Bengals?
Sure. I don't know why he wouldn't be to play interior 3-tech.
Okay. Who is the better fit? Walter Nolan or Derrick Harmon?
I mean, they're just different guys in terms of Nolan's a little more compact, as Jonathan said during our Friday roundtable, a little more upfield one gapper. Harmon's a little more traditional 2 gappers. It just kind of depends a little more what you're looking for. But I think both can fit schematically into a Bengals defense. Like Nolan's a little more Geno Atkins for them. Harmon's a little more, I don't know, I guess a little more BJ Hill type for them.
Which way would you go if you had to pick a defensive lineman there for the Bengals at 17? Would you go Nolan or Harmon?
I mean, it just depends on a lot of factors. If there are any character or coaching concerns on Nolan, which have been floated but have been tough to really verify, then you have to consider that. It just depends. Do you want more of that steady run defender, or do you want the upfield pass rush gap shooter in Nolan? So I don't know which way they're leaning, which way they're going. I mean, their run defense seemed to be pretty bad last year, so maybe you would lean Harmon, but I just hadn't spent much time thinking about the Bengals and their scheme fit and their needs and wants.
All right. That's something that's kind of got me hung up. Will Harmon make it to the Steelers at 21? And if he doesn't, and if Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant are still on the board and they don't go quarterback, what would that look like? And we've already kind of established that it would be a bit of a surprise because of the pre-draft activity if Nolan wound up being the guy.
It'd be very surprising, or at least for me personally, just based on the precedent. Doesn't mean they can't take Walter Nolan. Maybe there's some sort of secret meeting or visit they had that we just don't know about right now, but the overt interest does not seem to be there. And so it would lend itself to more of a Kenneth Grant, who, by the way, not that it matters much, but I think Albert Beard kind of hinted at the Chargers would have good odds to take Kenneth Grant if he was there at 22, one spot behind Pittsburgh, but if Pittsburgh even traded down, it would sound like a Kenneth Grant might be gone, and wouldn't be hard to connect those dots to the Chargers on Harbaugh and Michigan. So that just seems to be maybe the floor on a Kenneth Grant of where he may end up at the latest, if not Pittsburgh at 21. So, yeah, I mean, could Harmon be gone? Absolutely. When you have a quarterback class that's weak, when you have a draft class that's not super strong overall, you're not going to get top-end talent pushed down the way that Troy Fautani was pushed down to Pittsburgh last year. You're not going to get those guys that are as likely to fall because 6 quarterbacks take up all the oxygen in the room and push down all the other positions. You're not going to have that scenario play out. So it certainly can create more likelihood for somebody like a Derrick Harmon to be off the board.
All right, true or false? If the Steelers do not get one of Walter Nolan, Derrick Harmon, or Kenneth Grant in round 1, they won't get any of them at all.
Yeah, I'll say, wait, as in like, well, could they get them somehow in round 2? Is that kind of
Yeah,
the framing
that's
of the question?
basically, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're going to be gone if Pittsburgh does not take one of those 3 names at
All right,
21.
agreed. Another conversation I've kind of been mapping out here. We've had a lot of talk about the running back class and what a great running back class it is, and how many the Steelers have brought in, and everything along those lines here. But when you look around the league in totality of teams that could really use a running back in the first 2 days of the draft, and specifically teams that pick ahead of Pittsburgh by the time the Steelers are on the board at 83 overall in the 3rd round. How many teams are actually likely to take a running back there, and a running back within that time of frame? And I've got it mapped out, and feel free to add if you think I've missed anybody here. But I went and looked at all the depth charts and looked at all the needs, and I've looked at this from 18 different ways of teams that I think could potentially draft a running back before the Steelers' 3rd round pick, which is 83rd overall. And the list of teams that I have are the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Raiders, the Bears, and the Browns.
That sounds like a good list. I'm working on my full annual NFL mock draft for all 257 selections. I'm just finished the 5th round last night. I'll give a little spoiler and teaser away. Who do I have at running back ahead of Pittsburgh at 83? I got the Raiders taking a running back. I got the Bears taking a running back. I got Denver, as you mentioned, Dallas, Buffalo, and the Giants all taking running backs ahead of Pittsburgh's 83.
All right, so why the Bills? Isn't their running back situation pretty good overall?
Well, it was the 3rd round or the late 2nd round, but James Cook, his contract situation, did they do an extension with James Cook? Or is he still, because he was fussing for a contract before. No, I don't think they've done an official deal with James Cook yet. But also, here's the other thing I look at too, Dave. You do have to focus on value. I know running back and positional value, but just talent. And this is a weak class. When I did that live mock draft on YouTube last week, it kind of really highlighted that this is not a great draft class. It thins out pretty quickly by the 3rd round. So you got to focus also on just talent and who are the best players on the board, who have the highest grades overall. And it's deep at running back, it's deep at D-line, deep at tight end. So you have to consider that when it comes to who do we want to take here, what is going to maximize our draft capital.
They have under contract right now at running back Ty Johnson at $5 million, James Cook at $5.8 million, Frank Gore Jr. on a rookie deal, Ray Davis at $4.7 million. I didn't have the Bills. I didn't have the Bills as a top 82 pick need for a running back.
Ray Davis at 4.7. That's not his base salary though. He's a rookie.
Oh no, that's total contract. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you're looking at wrong number. I mean, Davis got involved last year. He made a couple plays for them, so I get your point. But
wait a minute. I'm looking at total value. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Let me resort this. They have Ty Johnson at $2.5 million this year. James Cook at $1.458 million. Davis on a rookie deal. Frank Gore on a rookie deal. Sorry,
I think all those guys might be on their rookie deals. I mean, Cooks, he was angling for the contract. I mean, maybe not Buffalo, but I do view, there's value at running back, and you got to look at the talent pool as well, and that dictates towards taking a running back as well.
And didn't the Giants? Giants was another team you had in there, and they had signed Devin Singletary, didn't they? Through next year. So
Yeah, but how good is Devin Singletary? I mean, I know Tyrone Tracy is there, but you want to have more. But if you lose, what if you get your running back goes down, your running back gets hurt? Then the Giants need offense. They need some weapons. They got to take some pressure off. I assume Russell Wilson. So I don't know. I mean, you can obviously debate it. I think even the Cowboys could wait. I mean, Brian Schottenheimer is on record saying that basically your comment of running backs are fungible. You don't have to take a running back early. Everyone thought they would take a running back last year, and they didn't take one at all. I don't think so. Maybe the Cowboys aren't as in play as people think. I mean, you never know. There's always surprises though of team. Oh, they didn't think they would take that position, but that always happens on draft day.
So you did not have the Browns as taking a running back?
It's also how many picks do they have? Let me see what I got going for them here. They just have so many needs. Yeah, I didn't have them taking a running back. I had them taking Milrow in the second round and Travis Hunter at number 2 overall.
All right. Long story short, I have mapped out 5 teams with running backs, and what if one of those team with a running back need, and what if I'm right, and whatever the list ends up being. Look, you could do this every year with this stuff, and you drive yourself mad. But what if only 4 of those teams take running backs before 83?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think
How plausible do you think that is in a good running back class?
I think more than 4 running backs will go off the board before 83 in the top 82 picks.
Well, more than 5.
I mean, it's all kind of really projecting out. It's hard to do. I mean, I have 6, so I'll just stick with 6 running backs are gone before 83.
All right. I'm guessing that only 4 or 5 will go before the Steelers' 3rd round pick.
How many in round 1?
I think 2, Genty and Hampton.
And then Henderson, an early 2nd round pick, you would think?
I think somewhere in that 2nd round, if a couple were to be taken, it would be a combination of Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, Quishon Judkins.
Okay, that's fair. I know you're burning all the midnight oil on the mock drafts you love doing, but where do you think running back slots in for Pittsburgh? Is it 3rd round? Is it 4th round? What are the odds on 1st round?
They get a 2nd round pick or an early 3rd round pick in this. That's kind of the way I foresee this going with them.
Okay, to use that capital to get the running back?
Yeah. If they, even if they don't do anything and don't add any first 2-day draft capital, I suppose I could see them waiting until 83 and then, maybe taking a guy like, Harvey, I don't know, Tootin, one of those guys, Giddens, one of those guys they brought in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, they brought in 9 running backs for a visit of the non-first round top 50 type options of Hampton and Henderson. Give me maybe the 2 or 3 names most likely, because I don't want to spoil any potential mock draft picks for you, but of like Giddens, Sampson, Tootin, Gordon, Blue, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, if Pittsburgh is picking at 83 or somewhere above in a trade, who are the maybe 2 running back names most likely of that list to be the target?
I mean, if Caleb Johnson's sitting there at 83, I don't see how you don't take him.
I agree. I guess the odds of him being there are probably lower than the other names I mentioned.
Now, RJ Harvey was one of the more explosive running backs. And if you're talking about a guy that can home run for you, I mean, he's undersized, but he's probably the biggest big play guy as far as 10 and 20 yard runs that could potentially maybe be there at 83. Tootin, I don't know what Mike Tomlin thinks about that fumbling problem with Tootin.
Yeah, I went back and watched all his fumbles, and it seems to be kind of on second contact on the way down is really where he struggles to secure the football. It wasn't like he had, to me, in my layman's running back coach mind, didn't have any like visible poor ball security where the ball was swinging. He had multiple points of contact, but it just felt like he was just missing out on having the strength to secure the football. If he was getting hit first and then getting hit again on the way down, the ball often came out in those circumstances.
Just loosely in my head, I have, even if they don't, like I said, if they don't acquire any first 2-day draft capital, in other words, pretty much pat with their picks as is now. I still expect this team to have the running back in the fold by 83.
Fair. No, I think that's reasonable given all the interest. Let me give you a couple other quick thoughts here. And maybe I should have brought this up earlier. I've been just kind of thinking about it, and it is me getting over my skis as I'm want to do here close to draft time. But
Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Do you think they try to map out kind of how deep do you think they try to go within? Because look, you get past day 2 of this thing, you know, the draft fans out obviously in so many directions. Or really, this year it fans out even after the first 20 picks of this thing. You know, do you think they burn the midnight oil saying these 5 or 6 teams are likely to draft a running back in the first 83 picks?
No, and I think it'd be pretty useless to do so. I know they used to do the full first round mock drafts under Kevin Colbert. They stopped doing that because they just kind of realized it's not really providing much value for us. The draft gets crazy, teams trade. It does not become a worthwhile exercise. So I think doing anything certainly beyond that. I mean, maybe you do some loose identification of team needs in terms of teams that have the same needs as you. Similarly, if you talk about if we trade up or who's kind of around us, who's right behind us that might have the same need, you may do some loose work on that, but you're not trying to spend too much time trying to figure out what the Joneses are doing.
All right, so as usual, I'm overanalyzing this, aren't I?
Yeah, but we're all guilty of that, and I'm just as guilty. As I'm going to overanalyze right now to bring up a different topic, but a name we mentioned earlier, Derrick Harmon. What are the concerns with Derrick Harmon? Here's one that I had that's not been talked about much, and I'm over my skis. I'm speculating probably too much. Is there a potential weight concern with Derrick Harmon? He got up to 350 pounds at Michigan State. He had to get his weight down. And that was interesting. I know for the combine, a lot of guys drop weight and then because they want to run fast. And Harmon ran fast. He ran a 4.95. He came in at the combine at 313. At his pro day, even though he didn't really work out, but according to Dane Brugler, he weighed in at 322 at his pro day, which is starting to get pretty large and in charge. And just for a guy that's had some weight issues in the past, I'm not saying there is definitely one right now, but he went up about almost 10 pounds from the combine to his pro day, which I thought was notable to be in that 320 range for a guy that might be playing defensive end in Pittsburgh.
I have not really concentrated really too much on that aspect with his weight. No.
Okay. So I just a touch point. It may be nothing. And again, a lot of guys drop weight. That's a pretty common thing for the combine. I don't know what his playing weight was at Oregon. I don't know if that's ever been on record or he's ever commented on that before. Maybe 322 is his normal playing weight, but it's a little bit larger for a defensive end. I think in Pittsburgh to be 322. I don't think they want Ben's not even 322, and he's their nose tackle. He's like he went down to I think 305 or something this past year. So just wanted to note that. But Harmon did have weight issues at Michigan State. He worked hard to cut out I think ice cream we talked about, and so that's all well and good. He's shown the ability to get his weight down, but want to note that just had that thought around in my head the last couple of days.
I think one of my biggest concerns with Derrick Harmon is the missed tackle rate.
Yeah, that was a big thing I saw on his tape. A lot of plays left out on the field, a lot of missed sacks, missed tackles. Got to finish a lot better at the NFL level.
And I think that's one of the things when you talk about a team with run defense specifically, that would be one of the biggest red flags and put one of the things that I think that could potentially make him drop down to the Steelers at if they go that way at 21st overall.
All right, fair enough. Let me just ask you quickly as well, what positions, not early, but what positions maybe later round are we not considering? Should we talk about offensive line more, about tight end more? Is tight end depth really that great right now, Dave? You got Freiermuth and Washington, your top two, but behind that is pretty murky for a team that is a base 12 personnel type of offense.
It would have to be a guy that, if they address the position, you'd either have to get the gift in the first round, like a Warren or the Michigan kid, to have me even consider it. And if I did not go that route, then if I was going to address it later in the draft, I feel that you would want one that the main calling card within would be run blocking. as a third. Someone that's kind of versatile that could be on the move as in some of that split zone stuff that they've been asking Connor Hayward to do. He would be a third tight end, predominantly blocking. That is extreme good blocker would be his calling card. And then he's got to have some special teams background on him.
Yeah, I wonder who those names could be. It is a really good tight end class, but any particular names, that aren't the top guys?
I've had a sweet spot for Gavin Bartholomew dating back to his early time at Pitt. If you were to take a 6th or a 7th round flyer, heck, he might even go undrafted at this point. I've always kind of had a sweet spot for him. I think Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech, isn't he kind of that strong blocking type?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's viewed as a better blocker, one of the better blockers in this year's class. C.J. Dupree from Alabama. Can Bartholomew block? I really hadn't looked at his tape in terms of a blocking aspect.
I think there's something there to work with. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Hawes is the better, and I think Hawes will probably, because of that, go somewhere in that 5th or 6th round range to a team.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know Tom Mead is a big fan of Thomas Fidone, the second from Nebraska. I'm not sure where he comes in as a blocker. There's Luke Lachey from Iowa. I think his blocking is not great, but just Iowa tight end. He did that kind of work, did a lot of blocking, so it's kind of a background doing it, even though it's probably some work to actually get more effective at it. But yeah, just we haven't mentioned much on tight ends. Pittsburgh has not done a lot of homework on the position, obviously, but a day 3 selection there would not be the most shocking thing in the world.
It would have to be someone, in the draft room there that we have circled that, hey, we really could use a blocking special teams tight end here. We're near certain he could potentially make the roster here in some way, shape, or form. I mean, this is a team that carried how many tight ends last year?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them.
4 often.
So it would have to be 1 or 2 guys that I had circled there. And obviously, what else is on the board at the time, yada, yada. So I'm not expecting it.
Yeah, I'm not going to discount it. I know you're not either, but listen, if you lose, Darnell Washington goes down for 2 weeks with an injury, rolls an ankle, you're in some trouble.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Dave, any other final thoughts here before we start closing out today's show?
Was there any other positions that you think we haven't talked about enough?
I mentioned offensive line. I mean, the depth there is pretty poor. Tackle, is Calvin Anderson really going to be the swing tackle this year?
I mean, I think that I think you're going to see this team make another move after the draft with a veteran guy. I know the Titans just released a guy that could potentially have the Steelers' interest on the cheap. If they drafted any tackle at all in the mid rounds, I would suppose that player would be maybe Charles Grant out of William and Mary.
Yeah, it is one guy we know they looked at. Isaac Williams, the assistant O-line coach, going down to his pro day. And so that's a really good athlete that would fit well in Arthur Smith's zone scheme.
I'm not mapping out them drafting an offensive lineman this year, but it's not out of the question. I don't think entirely.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I do think you're right, though, that it is more likely they add a veteran, because even if you draft a 5th, 6th round, 7th round offensive lineman, really you're going to count on him to be your backup. Not really, but you just want Calvin Anderson to just kind of waltz in and take the number 3 tackle job is also unattractive.
You need to add to that room some, especially after the draft, and I think they will.
Yeah, they always bring it. I mean, you get at least 15 offensive linemen in total for training camp to get your 3 lines of 5, your first, second, and third team. So at least 15. So not sure how many offensive linemen are even on the roster right now. It's probably not worth counting right now, but they'll add for sure.
All right, I guess the only other topic of conversation here, I went and watched some more Will Howard tape, some of that Kansas State stuff and all like that, and I've come around more to him as a mid round guy, as a 3rd or 4th round guy.
Yes, Dave, drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I went back and watched some of the stuff, the videos and all again of what you have, and tried to keep a real open mind. I think if this team does not draft one of Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart, obviously in potentially the 1st round. I really think they would have their sights on And look, who knows where Milroe's going to go in all this? I think they like Milroe if they could get. Here's the thing: if they draft a quarterback not in the first round, and I'm not going out on any limb here, I think it's going to be one of Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, or Will Howard.
If it's not first round,
yeah.
I wonder if those guys will even be there by the third round. I think Shuck for sure will be gone. I think Milroe will be gone. I mean, you just don't get invited to the draft and then end up being a third round pick.
That's
with,
where
with
that's what I struggle
exception.
with as well too. Did
Did
Milroe drop out or no? Or was he still?
It was Dart that dropped out of the draft.
Okay.
Which, what does that mean? Now that could just be innocent family thing, scheduling thing. But it was Dart. He will not attend the draft. Milroe's still going to be there. I know
that's
Malik
not guaranteed
Willis
nothing.
Malik Willis, Matt Corral, those guys have followed, but I just don't think it's going to happen. Just NFL, I think, would have a terrible look to invite that guy and kind of screw him the way they screwed those guys a couple years ago.
Yeah. I think there's a possibility of one of Howard or Shuck maybe being there in the third.
The buzz on Shuck, maybe I'm wrong. It's smokescreen season, but I think the Saints are looking hard at Shuck. I think I'd be shocked if he got past number 40 as his floor. To me, is 40 to the Saints.
Okay, but what if they take Dart there at 9?
I mean, they could. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback at 9. I think they're going to pass on quarterback at 9, either trade up in the first round or sit there if Shuck's at 40 and take him, or potentially even trade up for Tyler Shuck.
And look, people say, I know there are probably more detractors about Howard than pro Howard guys other than you, maybe. When it comes to mid round here, but I view him at worst. If you got him in the third or fourth round, at least you got what you would. I think the floor with him is someone that you could depend on being a pretty decent backup for you for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope you at least get that, which is what Mason Rudolph ended up basically becoming for them. But
and I know that's not sexy, but I think there is some upside for him. I see some of the things that you saw that makes him, I think, pound for pound, your favorite quarterback in this class, right? As far as capital and
that's fair.
The position group. I mean, I see it.
And it takes a lot for me to sit there and say, take a quarterback in the mid rounds. Usually I am out, and Howard's the one guy I think I make an exception for this draft cycle.
Right. I see it. So I just wanted to point that out. I spent some more time on some of that pre-Ohio State stuff.
Nice. All right, Dave, I got to run here in a couple minutes, but let's get a couple quick emails, get out of today's show, close out of today's show, I should say. Get a live stream tonight. We'll likely do a podcast tomorrow, recapping Tomlin and Khan, and then, of course, do our Wednesday show for our final podcast before the NFL draft kicks off Thursday. I'm talking way too fast, so take it away with the emails there, Dave.
Mike Shorter wants to know about Keanu Benton. You have tossed around the idea of moving Keanu Benton to 5 tech if we draft a nose tackle like Kenneth Grant. Why do you think Benton would be successful in the 5 tech role?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
He said we talked about if potentially moving Keanu Benton out to 5 tech if they were to draft more of a true nose tackle like Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, that's certainly.
Why do we think he would be successful in a 5 tech role?
Just taking on less double teams, playing a little more space. He's got the size, he's got the length. He played some 5 tech at Wisconsin early in his career. He played some 5 tech when Cam Hayward got hurt in 2023. So just trying to take away some of the needs and requirements of the run defense. He'd still play a lot of over guard, over center, and sub packages and pass rush situations, though. So it'd be kind of a best of both worlds.
I agree. Let's see. Mark Alves writes in, Dave, will you be owed a royalty if a sports betting app rolls out a bet my house option? I'll worry about that if it happens. Let's see. James Cicinelli, great draft profiles and roundtable was very entertaining. Hypothetical, if we try to get 2 first-round picks every year, but it takes 7 years to start paying off, year 2025, how about we trade a 7th-round pick for a 2026 6th-round pick? Year 2026, we trade our 6th-round pick for a next year 5th round, and we trade a 7th for us next year's 6. Oh boy, he's getting deep here. And you rinse and repeat this process until you have 2 first-round picks every year for 7 years. The only thing you lose is a 7th-round pick each year. The other picks you trade are just carryovers. I know it would never work, but he says his son thought it was interesting. That's a lot of math in there, James, for me. I know we talked about hypotheticals earlier in the show. I'm not even willing to go down. You see what he's trying. He's Ponzi scheming this.
He's doing the old trade a paperclip for a house kind of a thing. Yeah,
Right.
I like the spirit. I'm not sure the execution, but I appreciate the thought.
I know you got to get out of here, so we don't have a lot of emails in here. So let's cut it short there.
Yeah, we can do stuff for Tuesday too after Tom
Right.
and Con. We can do some more emails if stuff comes in.
All right, if you want to get something answered, join us for the live stream tonight on Alex Kozora's YouTube channel. We probably going to have a pretty packed house, I would think, tonight there. So 7 o'clock Eastern time, Alex's YouTube channel. We have a YouTube live stream. So within all that, thanks for all the emails. Good discussion today. We'll carry it over into tomorrow after Con and Tomlin meet the media and all. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. We'll be back on Tuesday. And until then, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.